My leniency has a limit. Who the fuck it? What's going on, guys, and welcome to my review of Madam Web, the latest in the Spider-Verse from Sony. A character I've never heard of before. Of course, someone who does not read comic books. Should that really surprise you? And it's a movie that I've heard nothing but bad things about. But of course, as I said before, I never let that stop me. I was going to see it regardless. When the trailers started showing up for this thing, I was like, oh god, this is going to be pretty much hated by a lot. And just like the character in the film, I predicted it right. Thank you so much, guys, for clicking. I really do appreciate it. So, in the film, you essentially have this girl who can tell the future, and she meets up with these three teenagers who she tries to protect from this evil Spider-Man, Spider-Boy, or whatever the hell they're calling it in this. So let me go on record by saying I have never heard of this character. I've never heard of it whispered or anything. Of course, if you're a comic book fan, I'm pretty sure a lot of y'all probably has. But for the rest of us who are ignorant to that part of things of the comic book world, of course we're not going to hear about something like this, just like we never heard of Morbius. So I rolled into this movie like I do with everything, even if I hear something bad about it, like everything bad about it, with an open mind and an open book. And my god, I tried. But before I get into any of that, let's get into the positives for Madam Web. I do gotta say, I do like the concept of the future premonition angle. I did like the fact that they threw in this character in Madam Web to where she could predict the future and see deaths before they happen. It kind of reminded me of a Final Destination scenario, only in a superhero term. I like that whole concept. I always find that really intriguing, especially if it's a Final Destination movie. But I really do praise the way that the story was, that just this character was able to, just do that, just predict the future and predict things before they happen. I always find that intriguing in a way. Unfortunately, the rest of this movie is, by default, and what everybody else is saying, pretty bad. I tried. I really did. I tried like the dickens. As I dive into my negatives, and this is... oh my gosh. This has been a long time since I've delved into the negative so soon in a review. But unfortunately, it is what it is. First and foremost, I gotta say, because of the story revolved around this character who could predict the future and predict things before they happen, which I like, but in a superhero term, I don't really find that appealing. Throughout this whole entire movie, it just never really appealed to me. And because of that, some of the movie itself just was really long and drawn out, and it just felt boring. It was an almost 2-hour movie that kind of felt 2.5 hours at best. And it just one of those movies that... I was sighing the whole time. I was rolling my eyes, and every time they would get into a scene to where they would talk and talk and talk, and then, oh, she'd have a premonition. She'd have to go stop something. And they'd go back to that same conversation, that same place, same time. It was like a wash, rinse, repeat thing. And I was thinking to myself, oh my god, this is not good. This is not a good sign. It's not a good sign. So they just kept on doing that over and over and over, and if they'd have just done it in a different way, I would have probably accepted it a little more, but the pacing because of this was grueling. It just didn't appeal to me. It wasn't exciting. There was some action scenes in it that didn't seem like it had hardly any action in it at all, except for the third act, the final act. It didn't really help the film at all, because they chose to do a bunch of quick cuts, and a lot of stuff that happened in those scenes in the most crucial scenes of a comic book movie that you're supposed to cheer for it and you're supposed to want more, but because of the way it was filmed, it felt like it was drained, felt like nothing was really put into it. Just the quick cuts and just the way that it was drawn out, it just made it seem tedious, long, and just not that interesting. Because of all these decisions that they have made to film these action sequences the way they did, it just didn't really help the experience at all. I wouldn't say it pissed me off. I wouldn't say it's one of those that really steamed my blood. But because of the pacing, and because of what the story was involving, about this girl having these premonitions and going back in time only to recap and go back to the same point that they were in, that I was already bored at, it just made it for kind of a bad experience and really boring and just long and tedious. And even with Morbius, I didn't really feel that way. This is the first time I actually felt that in a rough way in a comic book movie. No matter how bad a comic book movie is before, I was always able to look past that. But for Madam Web, it really got to me. And it was one of those that just kept on pulling and tugging my shirt. And it just wouldn't let go. And because of that, it just wasn't really that good of an experience. I hate saying that. Now let's talk about the cast. You got Dakota Johnson, who plays the main character, and I'm not even going to try to mention the other three that she was trying to protect, that this evil spider boy, or whatever the hell they were calling it. I felt like that she didn't even want to be there. Half of the characters that played in this movie just felt like they were just there to be there, and they just wanted out, and they just wanted to do something for a paycheck, and then just go home right after. None of the characters, none of the filmmakers seemed like that they were having fun. They wasn't having that much fun with it. And that was another thing that kind of drilled it down for me. With this character that has all these premonitions, they could have at least had fun with it. Like, even though they kept on repeating the same cycle, same wash, rinse, repeat situation, they could have at least had fun with it, and I didn't get that either. I just didn't feel like that they were having that much fun with it. They didn't really try to make it that fun. With the characters, with Dakota Johnson and the rest of them, it just felt like they were just zombies. Especially with the main character in Dakota Johnson, with Madam Web. You're supposed to feel something for that character, some excitement, but she didn't really give me a reason. She didn't really give me that much of a reason to actually cheer or to actually make me feel, because she was a drooling zombie. Every line she pretty much said was like a robot, just about. I never felt any emotion from her, anything emanating from this woman. And again, going back to my bad experience, that just added on to that layer of sour cake. We get introduced to one of the most boring, most blandest villains in the history of cinema, to where you don't give 2 cents about this guy's motivation and why he's doing what he's doing. That's how weak he is. And they do this weird thing with his with the lip syncing, to where like 90% of his dialogue doesn't even match up with his lips. And half the other time, when you're not actually seeing his lips being moved without the help of his voice, you see him where he's talking on the phone and he's got his head turned like this and he's talking, but you can clearly tell that that's not him speaking. It's just something about that audio. It's just felt very, very off. I must find them first before they find me. I thought you said you had them. This is me crawling up the wall. Your mother played in the circus. Very strange. It's like somebody on set, like the scriptwriter or one of the filmmakers, was just pissed off at this guy, and they decided to hire like somebody else to voice over this actor. It was really weird, and it was very disheartening. The main villain, the bad Spider-Man, I didn't get anything from him. He was so dull, and he was so boring. It's just one of those characters that I don't feel like they put that much of an effort in. Just like with half of the characters in this film. I'll tell you, I think this movie was just made just for the hell of it, just so Sony could retain the rights to the Spider-Verse. It's funny, like, how everybody talks about Into the Spider-Verse and, like, Spider-Man No Way Home and the MCU Spider-Mans. like how good everybody praises those. But when you get to a movie like this, of a character that hardly, I'm sure nobody has ever heard of, especially has not read the comics like myself, and then they just drop the ball. And it's like they're not even trying when they're trying to think of something for characters that we haven't even heard of, like they did with Guardians of the Galaxy. Even though I know this is Sony and that was Marvel, this is different. Still, they're not trying. I just don't feel like they're trying. They did the same thing with Morbius. That was another character I've never heard of, and it was kind of the same way too. It was a little boring, but this was kind of more boring than that. This kind of added to that of what Morbius was. Of course, this was written by the same guys, by the same people that did Morbius, and a couple other movies that has failed too. So I really don't get Sony's logic or reason for this to even be brought up. Or at least if they'd have just hired somebody else to write it, somebody with more experience with bigger movies, no offense, then it probably would have been done better. It probably would have fared better. It just seems like this is a movie that, what was the point? It's kind of pointless. I don't see this going anywhere, and I just don't really see the appeal that the filmmakers, I'm sure, was hoping to get out, even though I don't really think the filmmakers or anybody up there at Sony even gave 2 cents. Because they didn't really market it that well. The trailers didn't really look that interesting, even though I was set to go see it as soon as I watched the trailers, but it was like kind of a low bar. I was going to go see it, but I wasn't as excited about it as I was for something like Saw X or Deadpool 3. Bottom line, Madam Web, again, it wasn't one of those movies that pissed me off. It wasn't one of those that really drove me out of the theater, but it was one of those that I sighed a lot. It has been a while since I've seen a movie, even if it's not a genre that I usually watch, like that Lisa Frankenstein that I just reviewed. Even if it's something like that, I don't really sigh. With this, I sighed a lot. I was rolling my eyes a lot, and it just wasn't that good. I guess in the back of my mind, I kind of knew that it was going to be like this, that I was going to have the type of experience like this, but it's probably one of those that I'll probably just watch once. And this is the only comic book movie I could say this about. This is probably going to be one of those that, and the only one, hopefully, comic book movie-wise, that I'll probably watch only once and never again. I probably won't even buy the Blu-ray or anything. It's just a one and done for me, and I hate saying that. All my fears actually did come to play with this, unfortunately. It wasn't exciting. It wasn't that fun. Aside from an interesting concept that could have been utilized a little bit better, it was a swing and a miss. So Madam Web, what was your thoughts on it? Have you seen it yet? Are you a fan of this? Were you actually one of those that got some excitement from this, enjoyment? Did you like what this film brought out? Was this your favorite comic book movie of the Sony-verse, or like the MCU and any comic book that was combined? I really don't think that this was one of those that should have come out now. Just like I said with Morbius, it should have come out back in the early 2000s, because it seems like that's what Sony is stuck on for some reason, especially with characters like this. What was your thoughts on it? Or were you like me? Did you just didn't like it at all? Did you find it boring, long, tedious, and you just didn't care at all? Leave me a comment down below and give me your thoughts. Thank you so much, guys, for watching this. I really do appreciate it. Like, subscribe, comment, and share. And as always, make sure to click that bell icon so you don't miss a thing. And I will see you on the next one. Peace.